Hello and welcome to Elemental Hardware Enrichment. My name is Aiden and today we're going to be building finger basketball. Before we get started with building, let's go ahead and introduce the supplies that we're going to need for this project. So for this project we're going to need a hardware tray, a bottle of glue, a damp rag for any glue cleanup, some sandpaper and a sanding block, and we're also going to need our safety glasses. Let's go ahead and put those on now. Now that we've introduced all of our supplies, let's go ahead and talk about the tools that we're going to need for this project. So I have my toolkit right here. I'll go ahead and open it up and take out the tools that I need. For this project, I'm going to need my hammer and my Phillips head screwdriver. Now that we've got our tools, let's go ahead and close up our toolkit and get it out of our way. All right, we've got our supplies and we've got our tools, so the next step will be to open up our box and talk about the different materials we're going to find inside. All right, let's go ahead and open up our box and talk about what we're going to find inside. So to open the box, I'm going to be using the back of my hammer, and I'm just going to be running it along the tape where the two box flaps meet to split it open. Once I've split the tape, I can go ahead and grab the corners of the box and pry them up. All right, I've got my box open, so let's go ahead and talk about what's inside. The first thing I'm going to be taking out is the packing paper. Make sure to open up your packing paper to check to see if any small parts have gotten wrapped up inside. Once you've done that, you can get it out of your way. The first thing that we're going to be taking out of our box is this acrylic backboard. It looks like this. Next, we have our acrylic launcher that looks like this. And we also have an acrylic hoop that looks like this. Once you've got all the acrylic pieces out, you can go ahead and start taking out your wood parts. The first thing I'm going to pull out is this one. This is going to be the court for my finger basketball. I also have a wedge. And the last wooden piece is going to be my post. Now that I've introduced all the materials, let's go ahead and talk about our hardware. So my hardware is going to be in this bag, but before we talk about it, I want to get this box out of my way. So now we're ready to talk about our hardware. Let's go ahead and open up the bag and talk about the different things we're going to find inside. The first thing I'm taking out is going to be my ball, which is attached to this string. And then I have a couple of different bags inside of here. The first one I'm taking out is my blue dot bag. Inside this blue dot bag, I have 2-inch long screws and a 1/2-inch screw, as well as an eye hook. My other bag is going to have a red dot. Inside this red dot bag, I have 2 3/4-inch machine screws and an 1-inch-long machine screw, along with 4 nuts. Now that we've got all of our hardware and materials introduced, we can get started building our project. All right, we're ready to start assembling our project. But before we get into that, I want to sand my pieces to make sure they're ready for paint. So the pieces I'm going to be sanding are going to be my post, my wedge, and my court. I'm going to move my acrylic pieces off to the side for now. And what I want to do is just sand these pieces all down nicely so I can get them painted before we start building. So I'm going to need my sandpaper and my sanding block. I'm going to be opening up my sandpaper so that the soft side faces up. I'm going to place my sanding block across it, and then I'll wrap the sandpaper around it just like that. From there, I can begin to sand all of my pieces. All right, I've got all my wood pieces sanded, so now I'm just going to use my rag to wipe up any dust that may be on my parts. And don't forget to wipe up your workstation as well. Now that I've got everything sanded and cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and get my wood parts painted so that we can begin building. All right, I've got all my wood parts painted. I decided to just go with the traditional basketball court look, but you can paint yours however you want. Now that everything's painted and ready to go, the first step is going to be to attach the hoop to my post. So I'm going to go ahead and move these two pieces off to the side for now, and I'm just going to be working with my post and my hoop. If you take a look at the hoop, you'll notice that it has this open end on one side where the ball is going to go through, and the other side has this little narrow piece sticking out. We actually want to sand this piece down a little bit so that it fits well into our post. So what we're going to need is our sandpaper and sanding block, and what we're going to be doing is beveling the edges of this narrow section of the hoop. And we're going to do that by holding it against our sandpaper at about a 45-degree angle and running it up and down to round over those edges. So let's go ahead and do that now so that it fits nicely into the hole on our post. Once you've beveled it, go ahead and check to see if it fits well into the hole on the post. The hoop is going to fit into the largest hole here on the post, so I'm just going to test it out. And it looks like it still needs a little bit more, so I'm going to go ahead and bevel it just a bit more. All right, let's go ahead and test it out again. And it looks like it's going to fit well, so let's go ahead and push it all the way through that larger hole on the post. The best way to do that is to set it into the hole and then use your thumb to press it through the hole like that. Once it fits all the way in and it sits flush against the edge of the post, we're ready to secure it using our hardware. So for this step, we're going to need our red dot bag, and we're going to be taking out the larger machine screw and 2 of our nuts. Once you have both of those pieces out, the first thing you're going to do is place one of the nuts onto the machine screw. And you're just going to twist this on using your fingers until it rests against the top or the head of the machine screw. Once you have it all the way screwed on, you're going to go ahead and place this machine screw through the pre-drilled hole on the edge of your on the edge of your hoop. Make sure that the screw is going down towards the bottom of the post. That's very important so that our backboard can fit on later. Once you have that secured, go ahead and grab your second nut and screw that one on using your fingers. Once you have it as tight as you can using your fingers, you're going to pinch both of the nuts in place and use your Phillips head screwdriver to tighten that screw just a little bit. It's important that you don't over tighten this screw because you don't want to risk breaking the acrylic on your hoop. But once you're finished, you should have something that looks like this, and you're ready to move on to your next step, which will be to attach your backboard. All right, we're ready to attach our backboard to the post. So for this step, we're going to need our constructed post with the hoop attached, our backboard, and the remaining hardware inside our red dot bag. So that's going to be our 2 machine screws and 2 nuts. Let's go ahead and dump those out into our tray. Once we've done that, we're going to take a look at our backboard. Now you'll see that the backboard has 2 pre-drilled holes here down near the bottom, but these holes are different on both sides. The back of the backboard has these flat holes just like this, whereas the front has what's called countersunk holes, which means that there's a little beveled edge around each hole that's going to allow our screw to lay flush against the backboard. So when we're setting this up, we want to make sure that those countersunk holes are facing up towards the ceiling. So what we're going to do is we're going to line up the holes in our backboard over the 2 remaining holes in our post, again double checking that those countersunk holes are facing up. Once we've got everything lined up, we're going to hold it in place with our offhand, and we're going to use our dominant hand to set a screw into each hole. And we're just doing this with our fingers for now. So I've set my first screw. Let me go ahead and grab my second one and set that one in there as well. Once I've got both my screws set, I can begin to tighten them down using my Phillips head screwdriver. So I don't want to tighten one screw all the way down. What I'm going to do is tighten it about halfway, then do the next screw about halfway, make sure everything's straight, and then I'll finish them off. So I'll start with this screw here on the bottom, and I'm going to tighten it down about halfway. Once I've got that screw halfway in, I can go ahead and make sure everything's straight and then do my next screw about halfway as well. Now that I've got them both about halfway in there, I'm going to double check that my backboard is straight and then go ahead and finish off my screws. Now, just like with the hoop, you don't want to over tighten these screws and risk damaging your backboard, but you do want to tighten them down enough so that they lay flush inside the beveled edge on that backboard. Once you have both your screws attached, you're going to go ahead and lay your hoop down and pick up your 2 nuts. We're going to be screwing these nuts onto the protruding screws out the back of the post using our fingers. So let's go ahead and start with the first one. And we're just going to screw that on using our fingers. Once we have the first one on, we're going to pinch it in place with our fingers and use our screwdriver to tighten that screw down just a little bit. Once you've got that one nice and tight, go ahead and do the same thing on the second one. Once you've got it on there, pinch it in place and tighten the screw. All right, we've got our backboard attached to our post, so the next step is going to be to attach the post to the court to continue building our finger basketball. All right, we're ready to attach the post to the court. Now, what we want to do is grab our court. We can move our wedge off to the side for now, and we're going to be placing the post into this large pre-drilled hole here on the side. Now, you may notice that the post doesn't quite fit into that hole. So what we're going to do is use our sandpaper to quickly bevel the bottom edge of the post. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the post so that the bottom edge is facing up, and I'm going to place my sandpaper against it at about a 45-degree angle. I'm then going to run the sandpaper up and down along the bottom edge of the post while I rotate the post in my hands to just slightly bevel that bottom edge. And I want to basically just go all the way around one time to give myself a nice little beveled edge, which is going to make it easier to set this into the hole. Once I've done that, I can remove the red cap from my glue, place it into my tray, and then place a small amount of glue along that beveled edge. Once I've got the glue on there, I'm going to go ahead and spread it evenly using my finger. Once I've got the glue spread out, I can go ahead and clean my finger and begin to line up that glued edge over the hole in my court. Now, it's very important that you orient this correctly. We're going to be launching our basketball from this side of the court, so we want to make sure that the hoop is facing in that direction when we set our post. So I'm going to go ahead and set my post over the hole and begin to line everything up so that the hoop is straight up and down and facing in this direction. So go ahead and take some time to line everything up correctly. Once you've got it all lined up, you're going to take your hammer and lightly tap the top of the post to set it into the hole. Once you have it set, what I recommend you do next is pick up your sanding block and lay it over the top of the post before you continue hammering. What this is going to do is protect the backboard so you don't accidentally hit it while you're hammering. So I'm going to set this over the top. You can either do it this way or this way. I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. I'm going to brace everything in place with my offhand and go ahead and tap this down. Now we want to make sure that the post is flush with the bottom edge of our court. So if you flip it over and check, you can see that it's just perfectly flush here at the bottom, and I'm all set with my post attached to my court. So the last step is just going to be to wipe up any excess glue that may have spilled out during that last step. All right, I've got my post attached, so the next step is going to be to set up my wedge and attach that to my court as well. I'm now ready to attach my wedge to my court. So for this step, I'm going to need the wedge, my assembled court, as well as my blue dot hardware bag. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up and dump it into my tray. Once I'm done that, I'm going to look for the 2 larger screws inside this bag. So I've got my 2-inch long screws right here. And what I'm going to do is take a look at my wedge and look for the slanted edge with 3 pre-drilled holes. one on either side and one directly in the middle. We're going to be working with these 2 holes on the side. So I'm going to pick up one of my screws and set it into one of those holes on the side edge using my fingers. I'm then going to do the exact same thing with my remaining screw. Once I've got my screws set, I'm going to go ahead and flip my wedge over, and I'm going to begin screwing these screws into place so that the very tip of the screw protrudes out the bottom. Once I see the very tip of that screw poking out, I can go ahead and do the same thing with my remaining screw. Now we don't want to have too much of the screw poking out, but we do want to have a little tiny point here that's going to serve as a guide for us when we set our wedge onto the court. Once you have your screws set up like that, you're going to flip your wedge over so that the side with the pointed edge of the screws is facing up, and you're going to place a small amount of glue between your 2 screws. Once you've got that glue on there, you can go ahead and begin lining up your wedge on your court. Now it's very important that the slanted edge of the wedge is facing towards our hoop, so make sure that you're orienting this correctly. You'll notice that there are 2 pre-drilled holes here on the edge of the court, and we're going to use the very tips of our screws to line up the wedge into those holes. So I'm going to just place these over the top and make sure that the tips of my screws are fitting right into those pre-drilled holes. Once I have that in the correct place, I'm going to use my offhand to hold everything in place, use a little bit of pressure to hold it down, and I'll go ahead and screw my screws in tight to secure my wedge. Once you've got those 2 screws tightened down as tight as you can get them, your wedge should lay flat right against the top of the court just like that, and the flat back edge of the wedge should be more or less flush with the back edge of your court. Once you've done that, the last step is just to check for any excess glue and wipe that up with your rag. Alright, we've successfully attached our wedge, so the next step will be to attach our launcher to the wedge. This next step will be to attach our launcher to our wedge. Now for this, we're going to be using the remaining screw from our blue dot bag. That's going to be our 1/2 inch screw, and that looks just like this. We are also going to need our wedge. If you take a look at the wedge, you'll notice that one side has a large hole and the other side has a very small hole. What we're going to be doing is setting that very small hole over the pre-drilled hole in the center of our wedge. But we want to make sure that this larger hole is facing off the edge of the wedge just like this, because that's how we're going to set our ball and launch it into our hoop. So make sure that you have your launcher oriented correctly before you screw it in. Once you've got it set up and you've double checked that it's oriented correctly, make sure that that small hole in the launcher lines up with the pre-drilled hole in the center of the wedge. Once you've done that, you can hold it in place and go ahead and set your screw into that hole. Once the screw is set, you can continue to hold your launcher in place and screw everything down using your screwdriver. Now just like before, we don't want to over tighten that screw and risk damaging our launcher, but we do want to make sure that it's secured tightly. That doesn't mean it shouldn't move at all, but it should be kind of, a little difficult to move it back and forth. Now that we've got our launcher attached, the last step will be to use our eye hook to attach our ball to our court so we can begin to enjoy our finger basketball. Alright, so we're ready to attach our ball to the court. For that, we're going to need our ball on the string, as well as our eye hook. So if you take a look over here underneath the hoop, there's a pre-drilled hole in your court that you're going to screw the eye hook into. And you should just be able to use your fingers for this. So go ahead and place the eye hook over that hole and begin to screw it down using your fingers. Once you've got it screwed in as tight as you can, you're going to go ahead and take your basketball and feed the string through the hole on the eye hook. Now it is important that you have your string at the correct length. So what I want to do is set my ball into the launcher and I'm going to use that as sort of a measurement guide so I know how long to make my string. I want just about exactly enough string so that it fits into the launcher with maybe just a little bit extra. Once I've got that all measured out, I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot in the string to secure it to my eye hook. Once I've tied that knot, I'm going to go ahead and double knot it. Once you've got that double knot in there, you can go ahead and take your glue and place a small drop of glue onto the knot to secure it in place. Once you've got that glue on there, you're going to want to give it a little bit of time to dry before you try out your finger basketball court. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and I'll be back in just a minute. Alright, I've given my glue plenty of time to dry, and now I'm ready to enjoy my finger basketball. So I want to show you how you're going to set up and play this game. What you're going to do is you're going to place the ball into the large hole on your launcher. You're then going to use either your pointer finger or your thumb to launch the ball towards the hoop. I like to use my thumb, but whatever works for you is fine. You're going to pull the launcher back, and you're going to launch the ball towards the hoop to try to make it in the hole. There we go, first try. So anyway, this may take a little bit of practice to get it right, but I hope you guys really enjoy playing with this game. I really had a great time building this with you today on Elemental Hardware Enrichment, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next one.